And then interestingly, and like this was amazing, is that not only did the awareness lift in a big way, but consideration also moved. People who had seen 3 to 4 versions of the creative reported much higher likelihood of buying us. That's all I needed. I mean, we worked so hard on this. To be honest, I was scared shitless running this campaign. My agency had to like calm me down several times because I'm like, this has to work. This is like, really important. They assured me, they're like, Lindsay, it's going to work. It's going to work. And it did. And, just the outcome was so amazing.
Here's something most B2B marketers know but don't say out loud. We've gotten very good at measuring things from attribution, pipeline metrics, sourced revenue, influenced revenue, cost per lead, and yet a lot of B2B brands are forgettable. And it's not because the B2B marketers are bad, it's because the system keeps pulling them from what they know is the right thing to do, and they're forced to do things that are tracked, measured, and can be reported at the next board meeting. It's harder to attribute when you focus on brand. It's harder to justify in a pipeline review, so it often gets pushed aside. Welcome to the B2B Roundtable. I'm Brian Carroll. And in this podcast, we talk about the things that dashboards miss. My guest today is Lindsay Cournoyer, and she's been marketing leader at companies including Axonify, Coconut Software, and most recently served as the CMO at BlueJay, which is an AI tax research company where she helped 5x revenue and raise $122 million in Series D funding. That's impressive, but that's not the main reason I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to talk to Lindsay because while this growth is happening, she made a significant investment in out-of-home advertising. And this included billboards, physical media. In a B2B SaaS company, it was the kind of bet that's hard to defend on a dashboard. And she did it anyway. So today we're going to talk about why. And if you ever felt pressure to optimize for a metric instead of an outcome, this conversation is for you. And Lindsay has a line that names the problem really well. She wrote this in a recent LinkedIn post. B2B brands are so obsessed with being measurable that they forget to be memorable. And that's where we're starting today. So, Lindsay, what were you seeing that made that feel true?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say the obsession is real among executives and board members. And, I think back to what John Miller talks about all the time is that people want marketing to be a gumball machine and act like a gumball machine. Like you put $1 in and you get 3 out, and it's supposed to be this really predictable thing that you can just like game the system and get to the revenue that you want. But that's just simply untrue. And, performance marketing has its place. Its role is to capture the demand that's been created for your brand. But if you just lean into performance marketing and focus on that, you're missing the whole front part, where really what I believe is marketing's true job is to carve out that place in your buyers' brains and
Mm.
be the solution that comes to mind first when a buyer thinks of your category. And if you don't focus on building your brand and trust and reputation before you get into performance marketing, you're really missing the whole point of what I think marketing is here to do.
You made this significant out-of-home investment, which is unusual in B2B. That's not something people typically do, and it was a big bet. What was the problem you were trying to solve that the usual marketing metrics and channels weren't solving?
Yeah, it's again another great story. So really the reason I took the role is because the problem to solve was named by the CEO in my interview process, and it was not enough people know about us and the awesomeness that is our software. It's like we have
Mm.
this great product, but the CEO knew that, if everyone in the market didn't know about it, the company was not going to get where they want to go. So he inherently understood the need for brand. So I was winning already out of the gate. And like I said, that's really why I took the job in the first place. because of that understanding of the need to build brand awareness and trust and credibility before you really step on the gas of performance marketing.
It sounds like your CEO was enlightened thinking
Yes.
about this idea of brand
Yes.
because that is not the experience that a lot of B2B marketers have.
Yeah, I think, we undergo a lot of scrutiny in marketing that other departments just don't feel. We're continuously having to justify ourselves and our decisions and our plans and our budget and our headcount. And there's just this kind of skepticism around marketing that exists, and it's pretty pervasive. It's not in every company, but I'd say might be in most. And, it's really tough to operate in that kind of environment and carry that kind of tax. I have experienced it, and it really does just tire you out and take you away from the really important work that you should be doing when you have to be doing PR for your team all the time. This was a brand new product. It didn't exist. It was AI for tax research, essentially ChatGPT like experience where you go in and ask your tax question and up pops the answer with all the verifiable sources. And, it didn't exist before. And it was a much cleaner and more enjoyable way to do tax research than what accountants have dealt with in the past. Hours of like painstaking research and judgment calls and asking the partner. And it didn't exist. So the CEO really knew this is brand new to the market, so we need to go introduce it to the market, right? And I'm grateful for that, but I realize it's not the case in every company. So, I do think unfortunately we do have to do some explaining about brand and why awareness matters and why building trust and credibility with buyers matter. Really, I think CEOs should be curious about brand. If they're not, that's a mistake. They should take it upon themselves to go and talk to their marketing leader and really start to do their own research and understand why awareness building and credibility and trust is so important. Like that shouldn't always be on us. So I would encourage if there are any CEOs out there listening who, don't know a lot about brand or marketing and kind of see it as this black box, to really make an effort to understand the craft and the strategy behind it. And, I think in certain cases, there are just CEOs or executive teams or boards out there who aren't going to do that. And if you find yourself in one of those companies or situations, unfortunately, sometimes you just can't get through and win, and you will just carry the tax ongoing.
That's the double burden. You have your job to do, and then there's the need to justify the very existence of the
Yes.
function or your team, and you're constantly
Yes.
doing PR. How did you get there? How did you make that case?
Yeah. So I really, did something that we all do a lot of is I had to essentially act kind of like a professor on brand. And I created a really detailed brand strategy deck that I presented at an executive offsite planning meeting. And I really just ex- again explained that we have to carve out a place in people's mind as the category leader and a new solution that they can trust. And that we are already leading the category and are really like the horse that they want to bet on. So I went through quite an extensive educational exercise with the team, and the response was really positive. I mean, these are people who, really didn't know that much about marketing, and they leaned in and they were super excited. And, at the end of that presentation, I went through all of the kind of things you need to do to build brand and credibility and trust and, get that place in people's brains. And the culmination kind of that work was an out of home campaign and a big multi-channel brand campaign that was tremendously successful. So I had the support of the internal team, which was amazing, but I will tell you that there were skeptics. One of our board members was not happy with my campaign idea and expressed their displeasure. And, of course, our CEO was a little like, "Ooh," like, "Are we doing the right thing?" And I
Right.
just stayed steadfast, like, "Yes, we are doing the right thing." And, their argument was that this was too broad, it's not targeted, but actually out of home can be very targeted. So, you know, for example, where are the offices of the firms you want located? They're in specific cities, they're in specific areas, they're in specific neighborhoods. Go buy out of home and put a billboard like right out front of their office or in the elevator that they ride up and down every day. I mean, it's really about getting their attention through an untraditional channel, but I think it's like a myth that can't be a targeted play.
It's really interesting. And I was just thinking about when we did have John Miller on our podcast earlier, we talked about the problem of the MQL is that it's the last 5% of people who actually express interest. But what about
Yes.
the 95% who don't, who aren't yet in consideration, who don't quite even know the problem? And as you talked about, you're introducing something new, a new category, something didn't exist. So I just wondered, after it launched, how did you know it was working? What did you
Mhm.
measure? What changed? And what, did you have to admit you couldn't measure? And so you needed to build that trust with the internal team to say, yeah, we're still doing it because it's the right thing.
Yeah. Well, there actually is a very clear way to measure awareness, and it's not cheap, like, you have to put some money behind it, but what we did is we developed a survey, which we took to market through a third-party partner, and it basically asked people, like, "Have you heard about us? What do you think about us? Who do you see as the category leader? Are you going to consider buying software like ours in the next year? And, which product are you leaning towards?" So we asked a lot of what I think were smart questions just to understand kind of current awareness and perception levels in the key markets that we want to win. So what came back was really interesting. Our awareness was actually quite high. We had done a really good job kind of spreading the message and the product through events and partnerships. So what we were like starting from a strong place already, which, I think was surprising to some of us, but we came out strong. And, we did a 3-month campaign in 4 key markets where we used out of home radio, which is another underutilized channel, but accountants love radio. They listen to sports talk, and we did it Sirius XM, and, it was a great, again, channel to reach them. And, then we let the campaign go, and afterwards, we went back and surveyed again. And what we found, so the goal that we were going for was a 4-point lift in awareness, which is statistically significant. Like, we could say, "Okay, this campaign worked." And we got much more than that out of the campaign in the results that came back. And then interestingly, and like this was amazing, is that not only did the awareness lift in a big way, but consideration also moved. So people who had seen 3 to 4 versions of the creative reported much higher likelihood of buying us. So
Wow.
it was like that's all I needed. Like, I mean, we worked so hard on this, and, to be honest, I was scared shitless running this campaign. It was a big bet. Like, I was freaking out. My agency had to, like, calm me down several times because 'cause I'm like, "This has to work. This is, like, really important," and they assured me. They're like, "Lindsay, it's gonna work. It's gonna work," and it did, and, just the outcome was so amazing that, I have since left to work for myself again, but they're going to keep going with the brand investment because it's something that worked and it needs to be sustained.
And I think a lot of marketers are dealing with similar feelings. They're overwhelmed. There's anxiety because they constantly have to justify their job.
Exactly.
There's constant input given from peers. Like, you wouldn't tell
Yes.
the CFO, "Hey, have you thought of this ratio versus that ratio? What are some of the things you've needed to do to help yourself stay steady when every day people are wondering, why do we have marketing?
Yeah. You know what? I honestly felt like this campaign was big enough and high profile enough that my job was on the line. If it didn't go well, there's a high likelihood that, I may be exited because it was a lot of money and a big swing and a big bet. And, like I said before, I was terrified. But
Yeah.
I know this kind of investment is so important, and I believe in brand marketing through and through. So I really had this like internal dialogue in my head of like, you know what, Lindsay, this is the right thing to do. Don't go down the death spiral, right? Just like keep positive that it's going to work. And the creative was really strong, super resonant. Like, so I just somehow stayed positive and I believed in the campaign, and to be honest, if I lost my job over it, I would have been fine with that.
And so I'm just wondering, if you were talking to someone else who is a CMO right now as a peer or someone who wants to ascend to that
Mhm.
role, what advice would you give them to be able to stay steady as they're making these big bets and doing things that don't show up in the dashboard right away, like you just did?
Yeah. I honestly, my advice is if you find yourself in a situation like where you have a CEO who understands the value of brand, they're going to let you take a swing like this, right? And they're going to support you as they should. If you're in a company where the CEO doesn't get brand or why it's important, you're likely never going to get the go ahead to do something like this ever, right? So I would just say when you're interviewing for a role, and if you believe in brand and want to take a big shot like this, like you really have to do your due diligence and go deep on the CEO you're working for and the board and how they perceive marketing and whether or not their portfolio companies are doing stuff like this, right? Because if you see that they're not and all they care about is performance marketing, I think that's like a really clear telling sign.
And I think there's a lot of people who are listening are like, that sounds great, but I'm where I'm at right now. And maybe because there is this anxiety in the field of marketing, especially technology marketing right now,
Mhm. Mhm.
with the rise of AI, with the questions about how buying is changing right now and how
Mhm.
we no longer can put forms up and do content marketing the way that we used to. So I'm
Mhm.
just wondering, for that person listening right now who wants to influence their team and they're stuck in this tactical role of seeing marketing as the demand gen function only,
Mhm.
what advice or what suggestions would you give? Because maybe some people are where they are and they're saying, how do I influence or even try to make a difference in my organization?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge is just sometimes you can't make a
Mm,
difference.
hmm.
And it's up to you. Like the truth is a lot of us just need jobs and income, right? To support our
Right.
families. And, I had this conversation on LinkedIn. Lisa Adams posted this exact comment on the post about the tax. It's like sometimes we don't have a choice. We have to work in these companies that don't get it, right? And
Right.
I think, you know, you can either just accept it and do your job and earn your paycheck, but you can't let it like suck your soul. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to just be like, this is the situation and detach yourself from it to
Hmm.
continue to work in a company. But, if you can detach and just do the best job and collect your paycheck, like it sucks. But a lot of people do operate that way because we have to. We don't have a choice. But at the same time, I would start looking at the brands who are doing out of home and who are doing brand activations and start to, network with their marketing team people and get and follow them on LinkedIn and engage with their content. And, you can work your way into a better situation eventually.
Well, I think for some people, just that encouragement you gave could give us license to say, accept the reality where you are, but
Yes.
also open your eyes and don't let that determine what your worth is. Don't let
Yes.
that steal or take you down that downward spiral. Because I think a lot of people are in situations where they don't feel that marketing is valued. And therefore,
Yeah.
then they're like, well, then I'm not valued. And what you're saying is, no, there is a way out.
There is a way out. There are
Mm.
companies out there who actually get it. They are very hard to find. I'm working with a client right now where the CMO actually started in marketing. And, his first business was marketing services for a particular industry. And he gets it. And he's taking these big brand swings. He just gave away a Tesla at a conference to draw like people into the booth. It was amazing. And like he's leaning in and he's super interested and he wants to like input on strategy and like jam on brand and marketing. Like he's like a unicorn and they're hard to find, but they are out there. And like, when you find one, marketing becomes fun again. Like I am having more fun working with him than I'd had, in quite some time. Like he gets it. So they do exist.
I like that phrase, fun. Yeah. How can we get marketing back to fun? And
Yes.
what drew us to it, and a lot of people, I don't know about you, but I didn't go to school aspiring to move into B2B marketing. It was something I fell into, and then I just loved it because I love the complexity, I love the learning. I
Yes.
loved that there's a variety of things that there isn't necessarily. Yes, you can get specialized, super specialized, but at the same time, you have to have a bigger, more strategic view of things. And I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I I also didn't know I wanted to be in B2B marketing, but I love it for all the same reasons that you do. And it's interesting, again, in the post that I just wrote about this tax that marketers face, Chris Walker actually commented on it and said, this exists in tech, PE, VC backed companies. And if you go work in a different industry, totally different game. So, I thought that like really got me thinking is,
Hmm.
we all want to be in tech and we all want to be in SaaS and like it pays well and it's fast paced and it can be fun, can be brutal, but like what about thinking about other industries? I was just contacted by a potential client who their business is in rocket science and I was just like, "Oh my God, this is fascinating." Right? And like how cool would it be to work on something like that? It's totally different, right? So maybe another part of it is going to work in maybe a different industry.
I wanted to ask to close if a CMO or VP of marketing, a marketing leader, has an hour with their CEO this week to make the case for brand investment.
Hmm.
What should they say? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I always like to bring it back to an example that they themselves will see themselves in. Like, think about buying a new car, right?
Hmm.
You want an electric vehicle, you're going to look at Tesla, Polestar, I don't know, all the other brands that now make electric vehicles. But like, when you think of electric vehicles, you think of Tesla first,
Hmm.
right? They own the category.
That's right.
And, there you go. There's the example, right? Of like they've done well because they are planted in people's brains. As if you're buying an EV, you're buying a Tesla, right? I mean, now there are more options and we won't get into the Tesla thing, but like just bring it back to an example and a scenario that they themselves have been in. And I think I've seen then like the light bulb go on.
And if they were proposing an idea or a bet, any thoughts you have on perhaps the smallest version of a bet if someone wants to move in this direction, but they haven't won the credibility or trust yet to make that big bet?
I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to show results from performance marketing, right? Like to be able to tie your activity to pipeline generation and revenue. And I feel like once you can clearly make the tie of how marketing is impacting on the revenue front, that really sometimes opens up the territory of brand.
It's really good. And I think for people, we still need the big picture of what's the impact we're making on revenue, pipeline contribution, and using that as the basis to make the investment for things that aren't going to show up in the dashboard. What you're
Yes.
saying is you got to start with the dashboard, right?
Yes, sales have to be there, and then you you may get the shot, and that's what happened with me, and, I feel very grateful that I got to do a campaign like that.
Well, Lindsay, this is exactly the conversation I hoped it would be. And also for our listeners who are listening into the show, if you have more questions or follow up for Lindsay, Lindsay is doing work right now as a fractional CMO brand consultant with LC Consulting. She works with B2B SaaS founders and leadership teams on brand strategy, messaging, go to market. If this episode was useful, please subscribe to the B2B Lead Roundtable and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again, Lindsay, for this great conversation.
Thanks so much, Brian. It was awesome to chat with you.